Oldham Athletic might be newcomers to the Football League, but they're certainly not new to the Football League, with a club with a rich history that has spent a few seasons in its longer term history in the top flight of English football as recently as the 1990s. And so it's kind of got an ambition, I suppose, to get back to those heights in the very long term. I think it's great to see the club from a neutral perspective have an ownership regime led by Frank Rothwell, who just cares so much about the football club, and seeing Oldham Athletic have an owner who has that connection with the club after what they've been through is such a lovely thing to see. And you could see the connection he has with Mickey Mellon after that dramatic 3-2 victory over Southend United in the playoff final. But there's big challenges awaiting Oldham Athletic once they get past the pomp and ceremony, because while their playoff campaign was excellent and full of euphoria in the end, their league campaign wasn't as dominant as say, Barnet, who also join us in the Football League this season. And there is not much time in terms of preparations for the new season, with the National League playoffs coming so late in the calendar, and of course the Football League calendar in League 1 and 2 starting a week earlier. They don't have a huge number of players under contract as well, with some uncertainty over retentions. So some question marks over Oldham. Certainly a feel-good factor in terms of a rejuvenated club full of belief and a connection with its town once again. So plenty to get stuck into on this Summer Deep Dive. Yes, welcome along to EFL Debate. If you like what we do here, you can do us a massive favour by getting subscribed to us on YouTube and on Spotify. That would really help us out. For now, I'm delighted to be joined by my guest this evening, Chris Stringer, an Oldham Athletic fan. Chris, thanks so much for joining us. You must be over the moon to see the club have represented by an owner like Frank Rothwell, who you can just tell what it means to him, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, we spent quite a lot of time trying to get the previous ownership out of the club, and to have a local businessman, someone with a real love for the town. I think more broadly, come in and invest a good sum of money, but also really back a sort of wider project in rejuvenating the football club. It's been a really sort of heartwarming transition, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. And just talk us through the achievement that was last season. I went on the forum and there was a feeling that performance-wise, you didn't always necessarily hit amazing heights in terms of the way you played last season. So has that kind of shaped expectation moving into League Two, despite Oldham's obvious stature at this level?
Yeah, it was a bit of a strange season. So, I mean, those that have watched Mickey Mellon's football will know that at times it's not always the most exciting. So, when you're winning, that's not a problem. But when you're losing, it quickly becomes quite frustrating. And sort of going into Christmas, we were looking very, very strong, looking like a really exciting football team to watch, winning regularly, and then it sort of collapsed early New Year. We lost a lot of players to injury, Manny Mont, James Norwood, to name a couple of them. And we just never quite got that form back. A lot of those players were sort of in and out of the squad for a few weeks, it's never quite settled. And we sort of got to a point where we'd been cut adrift from first place, so we're thinking second or third place. Mickey Mellon was using the frustrating comments of keeping the points ticking over. No, Mickey, let's win some games. And we made it into the playoffs. Actually, in the form table, I think we were 15th in the form table going into the playoffs. Didn't have high expectations, but we should have known better because Mickey Mellon did what he did best and pulled off an absolute blinder in the playoffs. I think going into League Two, I think Oldham fans are generally fairly realistic for going into it. I think we know that the National League's a particularly tough league to get out of. And once you're out of it, it's not to be overly confident, but you tend not to drop back to it straight away. I don't think it's ever happened, actually, to have gone down immediately. I think what we'd like to be seeing is sort of a solid mid-table finish, but looking upwards, perhaps sneaking into those playoffs or playoff contention over the course of the season. But for me, and I think for most fans, we're thinking somewhere in that 9th to 13th, 14th sort of pack.
Yeah, absolutely. Just talk us through before we move on to the challenge of next season, which is that moment of winning at Wembley, because you were trailing in extra time to Southend, and then came up with a couple of moments of magic and a lovely finish from James Norwood.
Yeah, so Oldham hadn't played at Wembley for 34 years, I think it was. I've never seen us play at Wembley. I've never seen us promoted actually before this. And yeah, it was sort of a really bizarre game. You know, we went down early on, pulled it back early in the second half, and I was thinking we might just do this. Maybe an extra time we'll just do this, and then I hadn't sat down for 90 odd minutes, and that goal went in from Southend at the start of extra time. I was like, right, this is it. We're over. The kids behind us, my mates' kids, they were sort of in tears, and everyone was just feeling a bit down. And then yeah, out of nowhere, Norwood pulls off. I mean, at any level, that's just a sublime goal. And then the madness of that third one, straight after Kean Harrott just putting a ball into the box and it evading everyone and sneaking its way in. I don't think my emotions have ever quite switched so quickly, going from total and utter despair to being blown away.
Yeah, of course. It's funny how that football does that to you, isn't it?
Oh, I don't think anything else in life can have such a dramatic switch.
What one to the other, yeah. I want to talk about the people behind the scenes of the club, and it's lovely to see some familiar surnames in terms of upstairs positions. It's Darren Royal and Sheridan as well. So again, with Rothwell, who's an Oldham fan, from the cradle to the grave kind of thing. There's a real intimacy, I guess, about the off-field operation, and it's a bit of a family club, really.
Yeah, so the ownership is, so Frank Rothwell's the chairman, but actually the majority shareholding is held by his son and daughter. So Luke and Sue, who are both really really lovely fellows. So I currently serve on the Supporters Foundation, so I've met them several times, and lovely people. And then you've got Joe Royal, who's on the board, and his son Darren Royal, who is the CEO of the club. He'll be known to Wigan fans as well. Not usually in such a happy phrase, but certainly it's people that have a real sort of connection with the club. Really quite hardworking. Like any football club, they don't get every decision right, but by and large, I think they do, and I think you can genuinely see that they're fighting for a better club.
Yeah, that's lovely to see. And also, I imagine, Chris, that sense of transparency, and it must be just such I imagine the whole fan base, and maybe this is going back a few years now, it almost went a bit, oh, that's nice. When you go from having to fight tooth and nail for the most minor answers that might not even be honest, to all of a sudden, oh, you're just going to tell? Oh, love it.
Yeah, it has been a big improvement. I mean, you saw when we had the takeover, there was sort of people cheering outside the stadium, and jubilation with that. I think for sure information sharing has improved. There's always bits that as football supporters we'd like to be shared more openly, but that's sort of the job of a football supporter. But it really is night and day. It really is. And to not always have winding up petitions from HMRC or just bonkers news stories coming out about what's going on at the club. Generally, the complaints that we now have are about the playing side of things. They're not about, are we going to pay the players this week, or is David Wheater training with the youth team, or whatever nonsense.
Yeah. Oh, Jesus. Right. Well, so in terms of Mickey Mellon, then, Chris, he's certainly in the past he's been regarded as a bit of a specialist at this level.
Mhm.
Obviously, won back-to-back promotions to League One with Tranmere Rovers, and also won automatic promotion with Shrewsbury Town in 2015 as well. So he's definitely a manager with previous at this level, and he's has been a bit of a promotion specialist as well, which obviously his promotion with Oldham sort of adds to. Um, how is the feeling about Mickey Mellon, not just from a point of view of consolidation in League Two this coming season, but also let's throw it forward longer term? Do you see he's the manager that the club can build around over the next few years?
But my answer is very different now to what it was 2 months ago. um, uh, I think he's earned the right to have a good go at it again.
Mhm.
If he can sneak you into those playoffs, anything can happen. I think he's shown that with Oldham this season. He's shown that with Tranmere in the past. Certainly, the club has the ambition to be a League One team looking up, which is probably where we should be a club of our size in a town of our size. It probably should have a sort of decent League One team.
Mhm.
Um, he's got reasonable backing from the Rothwell family. As I say, he is the man that can probably get you into those playoffs and then make a good go of it. So certainly, I'd be giving him this season to show that he can do that. And I think the club will be hoping that he can make the playoffs even this season, but certainly over the next 2 or 3.
Do you feel like that's a bit of a tall order though, Chris? Like with, I mean, if I've got the names
Mm.
written down at the moment, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 9, 10 with Drummond signing. That's 10 players under contract for next season. Lots of, and to be fair, I would probably have to guess that a lot of those 10 players, there's some of them, like for instance, Harry Charsley, who wasn't even started
Mm.
last season really well, but then got injured and he's a bit more of an unknown quantity. Yeah, I'm just wondering, is setting the bar at top 7 for this coming season a bit ambitious given the state
Yes.
of play?
So we've got Tom Pett back in, and we've got Kane Drummond back in.
Mhm.
Um, I'm not totally convinced by Kane Drummond, if I'm honest. He looked like he had a bit of pace about him in his brief stint with us last season. It raised a bit of an eyebrow when we re-signed him. But certainly, I don't think he's a bad player. Actually, we're probably a bit fewer than you're saying, because I can't imagine that Josh Kay, Billy Waters, possibly even Matthew Worthington are going to be sticking around for too long, just
Mm.
because they didn't really play a lot. Harry
Right.
Charsley, I'd like to think we'd keep, because he looked really quite good, and he had a
Mm.
really, I can't remember what his injury was, but it was a sort of season long one. I
Mm.
think a lot of those in ongoing discussions we probably will sign. I think the big questions in those are people like Dan Gardner, James Norwood, Joe Garner, who are starting to get probably towards the end of their career, and I imagine the club
Would
will
you
be
put
wanting.
Dan Gardner in the same breadth as James Norwood there, Chris?
It's difficult because, again, James Norwood's been injured a lot of the season. So in terms of quality and ability, I think Norwood is a far better player. But in terms of the number of games you can reliably get out of them, I think
Yeah.
that, that,
See,
Dan,
see,
that, you know, Dan Gardner's probably more injury prone than Norwood. But going off the last season, Norwood's not started a lot of
yeah,
games.
I mean, my understanding is that Norwood is going to America to
Yeah,
have some sort of treatment. I don't know if that's public knowledge or whatever, so apologies if I've.
yeah, it is.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
Great, okay, that's a relief. But I think that if James Norwood is fit and firing, I think he can be one of the best strikers in League Two. So yes, there is a chance that he
yeah,
might only be fit for a third of the season, but there's also a chance that the operation works perfectly. He's fit for the whole season and he can rock. Because I think in the 2023 League One player final, I think if Barnsley had started James Norwood, they would have won.
yeah.
And so that's the kind of caliber of centre forward at his best. And I think he's a difference maker. Whereas I would look at somebody like Mike Fondop-Talem. He might have come off the back of the better season, but in terms of stepping up in League Two, I'd be more reluctant to place that same confidence.
Well, I think I totally agree with what you're saying about Norwood. I think the challenge is he's very highly paid. I don't know his exact salary, but the sort of reported one is somewhere on the order of £5,000 a week. So he's a very well paid player, and the question is, can you use that money better? Can you get his wage down a little bit? Fond up for me. I mean, he's had an exceptional season, and I think he's very worthy of a contract extension off the back of that. But I think the plan for him this season and where he's possibly most effective is as an impact sub. Someone that's got a lot of strength, the ability to put themselves about. You've seen it in all the playoffs games and throughout the season. His sort of athleticism, just really quite strong, really good at this hold-up play, which we saw best at York.
Crosses into the box as well. He's a bit of a beast, isn't he?
He is, yeah. And I don't think there's a whole lot of difference between the National League and League Two in sort of the efficacy of that sort of play. And I'd like to think we'd keep Joe Pritchard and players like that. But to sort of go back to your question on his seventh ambitious, yeah, I think that is an ambitious target. I think it's something we can possibly do, but I think my expectations personally is a few places below that.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at the squad then, sort of starting with the goalkeeping position, where you've got three players with a question mark next to them in Matthew Hudson, plus Donaghy and Maloney. I mean, do you think any of them, referring specifically to Hudson, have that capability to make the step up to League Two that you desire, or do you think you need to bring another goalkeeper?
I'd like to see. He's done okay this season, Hudson, but there's been a few times where I've questioned his handling. We saw us at Wembley for that goal in extra time, and actually to some extent for the first goal where he's been caught out a little bit. I was actually really impressed with Donaghy when Hudson was off injured. I was actually a bit surprised to see Hudson go back in, get the number one position again after his performances. Maloney, I see that we've offered him a contract. I'd expect he might go somewhere else. I wasn't totally convinced by him. I'd probably like to see us sign a new goalkeeper, if I'm honest, but I don't think we'll be in too much trouble if we don't either.
Right. Okay. So that would put Fowler under nice to have, but not necessarily essential if Hudson stays on. So I've mapped the squad out in a 3-5-2, Chris. And I imagine Regan Ogle would be your first choice for the right centre half role, because you got Manny Monte and Charlie Raglan if he stays on. So would Ogle be the right centre half?
Yeah, I've really rated Ogle this season. He's been really consistent. I think he's actually grown a bit as a player and in confidence. I think he deserves to be starting in that position. I think his natural position is probably more an out-and-out right back. And he has in a couple of times played that right wing-back role, but I think he's been fairly comfortable at right centre-back this season and looks like a good player.
Well, hopefully he's also on the young side because he only recently, So
I think we signed him from Southend, not Southend, Scunthorpe. He'd been knocking about in the National League North for a season or two.
Right. Well, hopefully Regan Ogle can have a good season in League Two. The middle centre half, I think re-signing Charlie Raglan could be really big for you in terms of your ambitions, because I've really liked him at these levels previously, certainly with Cheltenham Town. I imagine you feel like that's going to be a big priority for Mickey Mellon and co to get that deal done.
I hope so, and he's become a bit of a leader around the team. I think he was captain starting in all the playoff games, with Conlon being on the bench. He's looked really strong, especially with Monty back in the squad. I think Manny Mont gives so much confidence to the rest of the team. I think he's really important to keep fit. I think Raglan alongside him, those two together work really, really well.
Yeah, because Manny Mont's really a physical specimen, isn't he? Whereas Raglan, you wouldn't say he's physical in quite the same way, although he can certainly look after himself. But he's a very intelligent defender and brings those leadership qualities. And I actually think he's underrated on the ball as well, Charlie Raglan. So they complement one another nicely.
Yeah, I wouldn't describe him as sort of a ball-playing defender, but I think you're right. I think he's fairly assured.
Hmm.
He's not one of those defenders that has the ball at his foot and you suddenly going, where's he going to go with this?
Sure.
You're generally fairly assured with him, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So right wing back then, you mentioned Joe Pritchard. I think the big thing with him has been injuries, Chris, because when he was at Accrington Stanley, there was a case that lots of people made that he was one of the best wing backs in League One when fit, and that maybe he flew under the radar a little bit through playing for a smaller club, whereas if you're at a bigger club, you get more exposure, don't you? So I'm wondering, do you think that how's he been getting on in the National League in terms of just establishing that fitness side?
Yeah, so we signed him from MK Dons fairly late in the season. I think I can't remember exactly where it was, and he started all three of the playoff games, and he'd started a good few games before that. I think he made his debut against Rochdale back in February or March or whenever it was. I really like him. I think he's really intelligent on the ball. He can play centrally or wide. I think he's looked most effective in that right wing back role. Scored in two of the games, and two of the playoff games. I'd really like to keep hold of him. I think he's a really intelligent, high quality footballer. Not noticed any big injury issues with him at Latic, but I know he's had that in his past. So yeah, and we've had a lot of injuries, and I don't know if that's down to training style, the conditioning at the club. I don't know if that's something inherent or we've just had bad luck. So, but personally, I'd be keeping him.
Yeah, well, hopefully he does stay on because he's clearly got some quality to offer. What do you make of Jake Caprice? Because he is one that's definitely contracted for next season.
Yeah, so he's mostly been at that left wing back role.
Oh, right.
He's been superb, actually. He came highly regarded from, I think he'd been at Tranmere, and Lincoln fans seem to speak highly of him as well. He's got, I'm thinking, has he been at left or has he been at right? I'm questioning myself now.
No, he's been a right back previously in his career. He was definitely a right back for Tranmere.
Yeah, I might be talking rubbish there. Sorry. Yeah, you're right. He is at right back because when we signed him, I thought he'd be back up to Ogle, and actually he played both of them, and it worked very, very well.
I'm not sure if he's played for Lincoln. Actually, sorry to. I mean, maybe I'm wrong here, but I don't. I think he's played for Leighton Orient and Tranmere. I'm not sure who else.
I could have sworn he played for. He played for 14-15 season.
Oh, 14-15. Oh, okay, a long time ago then.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was really, really good, and then he's done his hamstring or something like that. He's had an operation on it. Really gutted to see him miss out on the playoffs actually, because he'd been so important for us in that run up. But yeah, he's a really good player, really good cross on him, really good bit of pace, which we've lacked at times. So I mean, the big question for him's got to be fitness. But if he's recovered well from his injury, I think he should be staying on.
Although I would kind of think having a right footer at left wing back, where you would kind of think that would imbalance the team, but maybe you've got Manny Month sort of flying beyond him, I guess, because he's
I'm trying to think. I think I'm talking rubbish there. I think he has been playing at right back, and I'm just getting my wires crossed.
I didn't know he'd played for Lincoln. You didn't know what position.
We've balanced out, eh? I've only been watching them all season, eh?
Central midfield then. I wanted to ask you about Harry Charsley, because he's someone who I quite liked earlier in his career. And at Mansfield, I think, where he was a very athletic, aggressive midfielder who likes to go and press. And I could imagine that I think Graham Coughlin liked him. I could imagine he's somebody that Mickey Mellon would quite like as well. So I guess and from what Oldham fans have said, it started the last campaign pretty well, but the hope is going to be that he can rediscover that fitness again.
Yeah, I think he only played a handful of games at the start of the season, and it was a bit of a awkward start to the season because basically all of our strikers were injured. So we were almost playing with two number 10s behind Fondop, which, as you can imagine, not always the most effective, but actually he was playing as one of those number 10s and looked really quite exciting. He was sort of a player that would get on the ball and drive with it. And we were sort of quite frustrated to see him go out injured because he just sort of started to get going. So it's another one, and this is going to be the question going into next season. If his fitness is okay, sign him on. But we need to be careful because I've said this about a few players now, and there's a few players on the retain list that have had injuries this season. How do we find that careful balance? And I think that'll be the test for Mellon over the summer.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because you don't want to have too many sort of injury-prone players because that can come back to bite, can't it?
Yeah.
So Tom Petts then has signed. I know he was somebody that Darrell Clark liked. I thought he did quite well actually in League One a couple of seasons ago at Cheltenham.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'm thinking that he should go well in League Two from what you've also had a spell at Boundary Park last season.
Yeah, well liked by the fans. Seems to be very, very athletic. I don't know what his injury record's been like before this, but he doesn't strike me as the sort of player that's particularly injury prone. If you can sort of get that intuition, but
Sixth sense.
but he's been a fan favourite. We've signed him on a 2-year deal, so clearly Mellon does rate him highly. I mean, you saw it at Wembley. I think it was in the 118th, 119th minute. Everyone's sort of blowing out their arse, and he's tracking back because he's just lost the ball and wins it back off a Southend player who just looks like he's about to collapse. He's been superb.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, hopefully Tom Pett can prove a solid addition. I wanted to ask you about Tom Conlon because in the certainly one of the seasons he had at Port Vale, he got first Port Vale midfielder to get into double figures for goals one season, and then the following season he was a real star performer in the first half of Vale's promotion winning campaign in 21-22. So he's clearly got previous at this level. Just wondering what you thought of him in the National League last season. Obviously he's held high, being high regard as a character, being club captain.
Yeah, and when he signed, I thought he'd actually chip in with a few goals, but he's not been prolific with us. But I think he's a really good leader. I had my frustrations with him actually at the start of the season, and then he got injured, and suddenly the midfield felt a whole lot leakier. It felt a whole lot more disorganised, and so I think his real asset at the club is that he's a really good organiser in that midfield. He's good on the ball himself, when he's got it. But I think his biggest asset is actually just keeping everyone in check and keeping that midfield organised. Particularly at times when Mont was out injured, I think it sort of slightly compensated for that. So I rate him, but again, he's another one of these players that's had a couple of injuries this season. And it's how you find that balance. It's why we ended up with so many midfielders at the end of the season. We had Rossiter, we had Evans, we had Conlon, we had Yoga Nathan, all of these players just because
a bit like strikers the year before when you had loads of strikers in your
none of them were very good. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering in terms of other options in midfield. You've got Ollie Hammond, who was at Nottingham Forest Academy. I think he was very highly rated there, but didn't quite go as well at Cheltenham. He had a tough loan there. Matty Worthington, I think, was one you said might be offloaded. And then Josh Lundstrom, who I think was at Crewe Alexandra previously, has actually played in League One, but not particularly successfully. So yeah, I'm wondering, would you like to see any of Hammond or Lundstrom sort of retained?
Yeah, Hammond's a strange one. I quite liked him, but I think he's slightly lightweight, and I think that's where Mellon got to it with him. He was one of those where when we had all these injuries in the midfield, I thought he'd be given an opportunity. The fact he wasn't sort of raises alarm bells for me. Maybe he's not quite up to it. He wouldn't be on my priority to retain, given that he's not played much of the season. I don't think he's been injured. I might be wrong, but I don't think he has been. Lundstrom, a weird one. I really liked him. I think he's a talented footballer. We signed him from Altrincham, where he was highly regarded. And then post-Christmas, for reasons that aren't entirely clear, there's sort of rumours that he was looking for a move. There's rumours that he was holding an injury. I'm not sure if any of those are true. He's not played as much. So I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't keep him. But if it's up to me, I probably would keep him. I think when he joined, he was a bit lightweight, but actually he's built his strength up quite well with us. And I think could be a really good player and someone that maybe we even get a fee for in the future. Matty Worthington signing was a bit weird because we signed him on a 2-year deal or an 18-month deal from Yeovil, who really liked him. And then I think he got half a game or something. He barely played.
Oh, right.
So I don't know if the plan was to sign him with a view to this season where maybe he's more of an asset in League Two, or whether we signed him and we could only get him on an 18-month deal and we needed that cover. And now that we've gone up, we'll try and offload him. I don't really know what happened with him.
Right. Okay. So hard to see him from. I would probably say if he's not a prominent part of your squad in the division below, he's probably not going to be in amongst it so much in the division above. I've got, forgive me, Chris, there's a name called Evans written down, but I've forgotten the first name, so you might need to help me.
Corey Evans, yeah.
Oh, Corey Evans, of course, yeah. Experienced holding midfielder, right?
Yeah, he's been really, really good. But we signed him, and after half a game, he was out injured for the rest of the season until the playoffs, and came back in. Was a really, really. He was the sort of older, intelligent player we needed in the midfield for those playoff games. You'll have watched your fair share of National League playoffs, and often the teams that do well are those that have got a bit more experience in especially in midfield, I think. And he did that job really, really well. I think if we can sign him and we can keep him fit, he's probably a League One quality player from what I've seen. But again, we've got another player where I'm sort of going, if we can keep him fit, and I suspect he's on a higher salary as well. I don't, but so I don't envy Mellon in having to make these decisions, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like him, and my instinct is to keep him.
Yeah, it's not always easy to kind of balance all those factors, is it, for Mellon? So we'll see. Yeah, hopefully there's a bit of news in the next couple of weeks in terms of retentions and all that kind of signings.
Yeah, they're sort of slowly announcing it. I think player by player, they're dripping it through until pre-season to keep us all interested.
Like Christmas Day, over the course of the day, spread it out. Don't open your presents up all in one go.
That's it. Keep the good feeling from Wembley going. I mean, they've been putting out videos every other day since then. So
absolutely, make it last as long as possible. So in terms, we've sort of touched on the striker position earlier, but one player I did want to ask you about was Uche Egbulam. And I'm led to believe that he's absolutely rapid, but a little bit like Drummond, maybe the end product can be a bit hit and miss. But I'm wondering if you think he could be a useful option from the bench this season.
Yeah, I probably have released him.
Okay.
He's very fast, but I think we found, and actually set up Norwood's goal. And watching the video back, it wasn't just an aimless hoof. I think he knew exactly where to put that ball. But over the other sort of games that I've seen him in, I've found a lot of what Rochdale fans said about him, which is that he's, like you say, he's fast, but he gets into the attacking position, and there's times where you think he should shoot and he passes, and he shoots when he should have passed, and just his decision making in those final thirds, not always the best. If we do retain him, I think, like you say, he might be useful for the bench, but I think we can probably do better in League Two. He's a very National League winger, in my opinion.
Okay, yeah. Do you know what? I think sometimes at that level, if you've got searing pace, you don't need to be super productive, because if you get into the position that many times, you don't need to take as many. You don't need to be as strong with the execution every time. Whereas I think with a step up, your pace isn't as big of a standout, because everyone's a bit quicker, and therefore you've got to be a bit more productive.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's Uche Egbulam, Drummond, who's quite similar, I imagine, in terms of that pace from the bench, and then Cian Harrott. I'm wondering about, because he's had some mixed stints on loan so far in his career. I'm wondering what you think is going to be in store for him this year.
Yeah, I only played a handful of games for us, but I really, really liked him. I think his intent is usually to get forward and try and shoot, which we've not had a lot of this season. There's been times where we sort of, screaming at them to shoot and they lose possession. He's one of the few players that I think's looked like he really wants to have a go with it. And I think he's played League Two football before and has been reasonably effective. And I think Mellon's probably the sort of manager that can get a bit more out of him. So yeah, I quite like him, and I think he can do well in League Two.
Let's hope that's the case. So what? And then Joe Garner, I think is. I heard he might be going on to the coaching staff.
I've heard all sorts about it. He by most accounts, he's been injured most of the season, or niggles going on. By most accounts, he's been fantastic, especially with the younger players at the club. Sort of really slightly surprising when you watch him on the pitch, but actually he's got a real sort of off the field leadership position, I think, almost. And I think that's been useful. I wouldn't be surprised if he sort of became player coach or something like that. I don't think he's ready to hang up his boots, and I think he's the first player now to have scored in all 3 National League playoff games, and was really, really effective up front, sort of with his dark arts, as they like to call them, but with really good goals. So my suspicion is they'll either be looking to re-sign him on sort of a smaller wage, or they'll be looking to see if he wants to stick around as a player coach or something like that. I suspect it'll be similar for someone like Dan Gardner, who's been in and around the club for 8 years now, on and off.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So in terms of we've already touched on expectations. Would you think top half would make a good season for Oldham?
Yeah, I think the fans are generally expecting top half finish, but looking to push on upwards. Not necessarily making the playoffs, but looking like there's a bit of intent to try and make them.
Yeah, well, let's hope that can be achieved. As you know, Chris, I'm doing my 1 to 24s in late July, and one of my processes for that this year is rating each team out of 10 on 14 different categories that I think are going to determine their fate. So what I'd love to do is throw each category at you, and you can give me a number between 1 and 10. How does that sound?
Right, okay, putting me on the spot.
I know, yeah. First category is ownership.
9.
9 for ownership. Lovely stuff. Infrastructure, quite a wide-ranging category, that one.
Ooh. It's tough because it's being improved at the moment. So in terms of League Two standards, good pitch, the stadium's in good nick. Training facilities are okay, not wonderful, but being improved. Can we do halves?
Can do.
6.5.
6.5 for the infrastructure. Okie dokie.
But going up as well. So improving there. But, yeah.
Okay, nice. Playing budget.
I think we'll have a reasonable budget by the league standards, and we have this opportunity to offload some players. So I'll go for a 7 for that.
7 for the playing budget. Management.
8.
8 for Mickey Mellon and the staff. The goalkeeping department, and let's say Matt Hudson and Will Donaghy stay on.
I probably think they put us middle of the pack in League Two, so by that standard, it should be a 5, right?
Okay, yeah, 5 out of 10 for goalkeeping. Defence, and let's assume for the purposes of this that Charlie Raglan signs a new deal.
Charlie Raglan, Monte, Ogle. It's probably actually one of the better back threes in the league. I think especially Monte and Raglan, who have proven stature at this level. I'll go for a 7.5 with that. I think that's really strong for us.
Okay, nice. Midfield, let's include the wing backs in this, so the likes of Caprice and Pritchard, if he stays.
Yeah. It's a tough one because it's been chop and change a bit this season. So it's hard to really assess how well the midfield's done. Actually, if I'm going based on the playoff campaign and thinking about Pet, Evans, looking really, really strong together, I may be thinking again 6.5, 7.
Yeah. Okay. Should we go 6.5?
Why not?
Okay. And next one is attack, and again similar principle. Let's assume Joe Garner stays on as player coach, and Norwood and Fondop also stay.
I think this is probably our weakest place at the moment. I think Fondop has had a very, very good season, and if he can emulate that, actually, we'll be flying. Norwood is a superb striker, as we've covered, but he's injury prone, or has been this last season. So there's a big question over his fitness. Joe Garner's been injured most of the season, and then actually we've not got much cover. So actually, as it stands, it's probably one of the weaker attacks in the league. So you're probably putting yourself at a 3 or a 4, I think, as it stands.
Okay, if we're saying 5's the average, okay. And next one is depth. I mean, obviously that would be very low in terms of who's under contract now. But again, let's presume that another 6 or 7 of the players that haven't signed yet sign up, and then there's another 5 signings.
Yeah, I think if he builds the squad in the same way that he has this season, which I mean, it's a tough one because of course with the National League you're not bound by transfer windows, so he's been able to be a bit more flexible. But he has put a real emphasis on depth, which I think is what really stood us out in the playoffs. So I assuming that, I'd probably be thinking 7 or 8. I think our depth will probably be quite strong.
Okay, should we go for a 7 for depth?
Let's go for a 7 for it. But I think again, it depends how well the transfer window goes because, of course, we're starting a bit later than other teams. So that's sort of an assumption based on how Mellon's built his squad this season just gone.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Next category is squad stability.
Oh, that's been poor this season, largely because of injuries. And we've said already that we've got a lot of players that are quite injury prone. So that probably puts us about a 4. It's probably a bit below average.
Okay, interesting. Next one is growth potential.
Let's have a look. I think. Are you thinking in terms of players that will improve this coming season?
Yes. So often I'm referring to young players, although it doesn't have to necessarily be, but somebody you think is going to be a lot better this season as opposed to last.
Yeah, looking at those that have retained, I think Ogle can really, really improve. Charsley has the potential to improve if we do keep him. Kean Harrott, I think he's season.
I think Charsley might be under contract actually, Chris.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, but I mean, I don't know if he'll stay or if he'll.
I see. Right.
If we'll try moving on, or Kean Harrott, I think he's only 22, so I think he seems like he's been around for quite a while, but he is actually a very young player. I think there's 3 that can really improve. But actually, I think a lot of our squad is either fairly established or on the older end of the age group. So we're probably about average on this. So probably 5.
We'll go for 5. Next one is team spirit.
Oh, that's been really, really strong, actually. And I think that's what kept us in the playoffs when we were playing really quite poor football. And I think that's what got us through the playoffs. So I'll go for an 8 on that.
8 for team spirit. Lovely. Fitness.
That's yes, probably a 3.
3 for fitness. And quality.
I think if we go into League 2 with the sort of team that finished the season in the playoffs, we're firmly in the top half. So I'll probably go for a 6 on that, just on the basis that I think we're slightly above the middle of the pack.
6 on quality. Right, lovely. So some final quick fire questions from me then, Chris. What's the biggest reason to believe in Oldham Athletic right now?
Good ownership and good spirit around the club and the town generally, I think.
I thought you were going to say the ownership, yeah. Biggest reason for doubt?
we were really crap post Christmas this year.
Fair enough. And final one, too early for a prediction, but give me a rough feel on what you think might be in store.
Oh, I'll tell you ninth now. I think that's where I think we'll have a good go at making the playoffs. I think just because we'll probably have to make a few changes. We'll start a bit late. Our fitness might be just a week or two behind other teams. I think we'll be a little bit slow out of the traps and grow into the season. Just about miss out on the playoffs.
Well, that's. I think that would be a good season. Chris, thanks so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to get your insight on the Latic. So thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, really pleased to have been able to do it. It's been a while since I've talked about EFL football,
especially in relation to Oldham Athletics. Thanks so much. Thanks to everyone for watching at home. This has been the EFL Debate Oldham Athletics Summer Deep Dive. If you like what we do here, you can get subscribed to us on YouTube and on Spotify. That would help us out a lot. And we'll see you again for another Summer Deep Dive very soon.